Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, a very important topic that we have picked up, and that is about the first official national security policy of Pakistan that is going to be launched on Friday. That means the day after tomorrow, and the Prime Minister Imran Khan Sahab is going to launch it. And perhaps this is the first time that we have really considered economy as the major pillar of our national security policy. As we all know, we do talk about the internal threats. We always talk about the external threats. We talk about the food security, water security. On top, the changing weather patterns or perhaps the climate change is going to be another challenge for the country, as we will be among the top 6 countries that are going to get affected because of the global warming. Again, talking about so many other areas which are very important, but this is the time that the country's leadership has decided that we will move from the geostrategic frame of mind to geoeconomics. Perhaps the trade is going to start soon with India. And this is the policy in which they have also mentioned that there is going to be for another 100 years in which we would make sure that peace prevails as far as India is concerned. And this is the central, I would say, point about it. Now, we also talk about the economic and human security. I would also mention population as a very major issue over here, and implementation of framework for state institutions. I think that is going to be another very important area of our discussion today, and the input from the relevant departments and experts. It has to be there as well, because it is not the duty of the military or men in uniform to formulate a policy. It has to be a very comprehensive document, and this is exactly what we are all expecting. We've also learned that the national security policy that is going to be announced on Friday will have about 100 pages. So 100 pages means that it is more or less like a book, a very comprehensive one. And obviously guidelines regarding the foreign policy, the defense policy, and also the economic policy. So before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that, and after that we'll talk about it.
First ever comprehensive national security policy of Pakistan with special emphasis on economic security of the citizens of the state was approved in December 2021. National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf, in a series of tweets, termed it a truly historic achievement and told that a public version of this comprehensive document will be launched by Prime Minister Imran Khan in due course. He added that a citizen-centric comprehensive national security policy with economic security at the core will be pursued in earnest. According to the media reports, Prime Minister Imran Khan will launch the country's first ever national security policy on 14th January 2022. According to the media reports, the original version of the policy will remain classified. However, a public version of the document will be released. Moreover, according to the media reports, the national security policy provides overall direction about the national security, focusing on increasing national resource pie to strengthen Pakistan's traditional and non-traditional security, focusing on peace and economic diplomacy-centered foreign policy and hybrid warfare. National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf, while talking to the private channel, said that implementation of the country's first ever national security policy would be ensured through a clearly devised framework for the state institutions. He said that Pakistan's principal stance on India will remain focused on the fact that India has to revoke its 5th August 2019 Mayas for resuming the bilateral talks with Pakistan.
Now, to talk about it, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti, who is a senior defense analyst. Sir, thank you so much for your time. And from Lahore, we have with us Dr. Rabia Akhtar. She is the director of CSSPR University of Lahore and author of the book, The Blind Eye, US Non-Proliferation Policy Towards Pakistan, from Ford to Clinton. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure to have you on the show. And we'll also be talking to Mr. Kamran Yusuf, senior journalist, around 8:25 p.m. Pakistan time. He's going to join us on the telephone. Now, sir, starting off from you, AVM Saab, Prime Minister was also briefed by the Inter-Services Intelligence about this new national security policy. Now, what we have learned is that, yes, the external threats were there, are there, and perhaps will remain there. We have got internal issues as well. There are so many fault lines that need to be taken care of. And then you talk about the weather change, or perhaps you talk about the food security, the water security, you talk about the population, and so much more. But this time, sir, the real emphasis is on the economy of Pakistan. As far as you are stable in terms of your economic development, I think all is well. But when you see that you are all over asking for money to make sure that your reserves touch a certain level, sir, I think that is not the right way forward. It could be ad hoc based decision making, but in the long run, you really need to be thinking on some other lines. Now, sir, starting off this very important and comprehensive, I would say, strategic point, that economy should be the base. We need to move from geo-strategic frame of mind to geo-economics. But sir, that is not an easy journey. I think we should have done it much earlier in 80s. But as they say, der aaye durust aaye. Your take on this point, sir?
Well, it is a very important milestone for the country. And as you said, this should have happened 30, 40 years ago, because the rest of the world, at least all major countries and most countries, moved on to economics as their leading determinant of their policies. And we had our own issues. That is why we went on to continue with the geo-strategic issues that were facing us. And while we did realize that we need to give more importance to economics and stability of the country, be it political stability and economic stability. And the viewers would know that Pakistan started to work on this 7 years ago, but somehow it remained in work in progress. And eventually, alhamdulillah, we were able to finish it and come out with it, have it approved. And hopefully, as you mentioned, in the 2 days' time, it will be formally released. And it's a very comprehensive document. And besides security, it's going to issue a host. It's going to address a host of issues. It's going to lay out a host of goals and objectives for the country, and which I'm sure is going to bring about a revolutionary change in policy making, in strategy making, in, I think, all major domains of the government. And be it health, be it education, be it industry, be it exports, be it foreign policy, it's going to address all these major areas. And I'm sure it's going to bring about a very positive and a very productive change in the thought process of our government functionaries. And I'm sure it's going to do a lot good to the well-being of the people, especially security, be it internal security or security from threats across the border.
Naveen, you really mentioned that it is a very comprehensive document, but perhaps this is the first time that economy has been considered as the benchmark now. I think that is very important, because the economy is not only about having money in your bank account, it's about running a system and then having a long-term policy, a long-term planning, and then all the inputs should be in alignment. If it is not the case, things would be very different. Now, coming to you, Dr. Rabia Akhtar Sahib, I'm sure you must have gone through the details of this document, but maybe another 48 hours from now, we'll all be having a copy of it, and we'll be, in fact, talking about it as well. But now, first point, ma'am, because initially we all thought that, the national security, or the national security policy for that matter, is something which is the domain of the Pakistan Army or the military in general. Now, we have realized finally that it is not only the assignment or the job of the men in uniform, but it has to be a very comprehensive, I would say, a document where major issues are addressed, whether it is about the water security, the food security, the population growth, changing weather pattern. We all witnessed what happened in Murree about a few days ago, where there was this blizzard, and nobody has ever witnessed that kind of a snowfall within a time frame of, say, 4 to 5 hours. And that was unprecedented. But what I'm saying is that, ma'am, now it seems that the direction is absolutely correct. But I think the implementation is going to be a real challenge. We always talked about the National Action Plan also, those 20-point agenda. But ma'am, when it comes to the implementation, that's where the challenges are. Your take.
Thank you so much, Faisal, for having me on the show. I believe that strong defense is critical for Pakistan, and diplomacy without strength is shallow and empty. I've been reading reports, tweets on social media, commentary on national security policy, and it seems that people have sort of taken an isolated stance on national security policy, whereas that is not the case. As you will see, whatever public viewing of this will be unveiled by the Prime Minister on Friday. It is only through the confidence of strength that allows Pakistan to act with responsibility to shape a peaceful neighborhood. And evolving Indian technological and military programs impose on Pakistan the need for constant vigilance. So how can a strategy and state security be divorced from national security policy framework with sole focus on economic security? The focus on economic security in the national security policy, I must state, and I want our viewers to understand it as well, is not at the cost of state security and strategy, because they both complement each other. And for people to believe as if this focus towards economic security is somehow at the neglect of territorial or state security is a misunderstanding of the national security policy. We must understand that Pakistan faces serious challenges to its security, and these challenges are in various domains. There's continued nuclear and conventional modernization, which is carried out by nuclear weapon states. Then there are ambiguities generated from the contemporary power structure. And there are also emerging and disruptive technologies that are shaping states' policy choices. So while Pakistan is affected by all these variables, it can no longer be seduced by the outdated vocabulary of framing national security as only serving the core geostrategy and be confined to safeguarding the territorial integrity of the state of Pakistan. So from where I see it, NSP is an umbrella document. Pakistan's sovereignty is no longer only threatened by the land, sea, or air attacks against it. We need to understand that the domain of cyber warfare, enhancement of military capabilities in space, threatening Pakistan's cybersecurity infrastructure, use of disinformation to damage Pakistan's social and political fabric, all of them are also potent threats to Pakistan's national security. And once public will get to view some components that will be made declassified of the national security policy, people will start to look at it for the umbrella document that it is.
Now, obviously, there would be certain very important points which are supposed to be classified. They might not be shared. But generally speaking, ma'am, one quick comment before I talk to AVM Saab here is about, since you mentioned about the nuclear policy, about the problem perhaps that is about the neighbors that we have. On one side, we have a very fluid situation that is Afghanistan. Honestly speaking, no idea what's going to happen out there, but it's not good. And if situation in Afghanistan is not good, means that it is going to have its own fallout factor on Pakistan, and Pakistan will be affected. On the other side, we have India. Our policy has always been Indian-centric, so the case is with them. But now, ma'am, having a hostile neighbor, on one side we hear that they have in fact stationed their S-400 systems, so many battalions on our border close to Punjab and Kashmir. And then we hear about Rafales, and then we hear about the purchase of, certain assets, military assets, I would say. So when you have a neighbor of that sort, and at the same time, Pakistan plans to have some sort of a decent relationship. When I say decent, means that, we are looking forward to start off the trade with the Indian on the border as well. And perhaps we'll let them do trade with Afghanistan using our soil. So, ma'am, don't you think that this is the time that we should also consider certain important areas like fifth generation warfare or modern nuclear policy, or perhaps the kind of threat that is being posed by the Indians? So there has to be a very thin line somewhere, which should be there, by the way, in order to create that kind of an equilibrium? Your take?
It's this national security is all encompassing, right? It protects the nation from internal and external threats. Pakistan's eastern border is already volatile, and we are seeing constant nuclear and conventional modernization by India. And as you rightly pointed out, our western border is also not stable, even though the security situation is still fragile. But when Pakistan talks about economic security, it does not mean that automatically everything is going to be all right. It takes two to tango. And I don't foresee that Pakistan is going to compromise on the core issue of Kashmir and put it aside and then talk about 100 years of peace with India. I don't see this national security policy taking that direction at the cost of Kashmir and the core issues that have sort of, pushed India and Pakistan into a stalemate situation. So, like I said, given the militarized Hindutva nationalism that is driving the RSS BJP government, until and unless we go back to the previous August 5th position. I don't foresee that Pakistan and India will start their dialogue process, and it will not happen at the cost of Kashmir. So while Pakistan wants an environment in which its economic security plan could foster, it is not going to be a unilateral road for Pakistan. That I can assure you.
All right. Now, sir, when you talk about India, it's not only about the threat that is being posed from that side. But, sir, perhaps whether you talk about the IMF bailout package, India is going to create a lot of hindrances. You talk about FATF issues, sir. The clear and present danger is always there. You talk about the use of Afghanistan and their soil against Pakistan. That has been the case. Now things have changed, but you can't, just close your eyes on that particular aspect. That is there, will remain there, and we have to counter that as well. And on top, sir, whether you talk about cricket, or you talk about any other issue, sir. I mean, the hate factor is there, sir, and it's very, very prominent. Do you think, sir, even because in this particular document we have also learned that yes, let's move forward and keep Kashmir aside for the time being. We'll talk about it. You'll also talk about it, but let's not bring in right away, because the moment Kashmir becomes the first and the foremost issue, sir, you can't move forward. And this is what we have witnessed, and especially post July, August 2019. I mean, if we look at the relationship between Pakistan and India, it's almost at a standstill, sir. Virtually, it's like that. Now, in order to improve the relationship, sir, or let's talk about the CBMs, the confidence building measures, sir. Do you think these two countries are in a position politically and otherwise to move forward now?
Well, we look forward to such a situation where, of course, the relations improve, there is trade, there is business, and there is routes available to India through Pakistan to Central Asia, and there is trade that takes place, which of course is to the betterment of both the countries, their people and their well-being. But at the moment we see that we have a religious extremist government in India. They are wanting to continue oppressing the minorities, especially Muslims, and now we have lately seen even the Christians have become their target. So with such a mindset, while Pakistan may be attempting to develop and improve relations and lead on to business and trade trade routes through Pakistan for India, it will be an uphill task, it will be a huge challenge. And while it is to the interest of the people of India, to the government of India, and I hope they see the light, and they do realize that this is in the interest of not just Pakistan, but in the interest of India and Indian people and their well-being. And there are sane voices within India. They do talk about it, but unfortunately the overwhelming majority that we have seen in the Indian government, they are all extremist Hindutva followers, and they continue to take out slogans of killing minorities, especially Muslims. So, in that environment, it will be a huge challenge. While Pakistan may be wanting to do it, and it is good that we have expressed our desire, and the onus lies now on India, and the ball is in their court, and let's see how they respond and react to it. And while Pakistan is taking a very noble initiative, and if it is just not in Pakistan's interest, but also in the Indian interest as well. So we can hope that the world will also nudge India towards this side, and let's hope that they do respond to Pakistan positively. And if both countries do decide to, despite Kashmir, build relations, build business, build trade, and through trade routes going to Central Asia and to rest of Europe, I think it will be a very important, very effective confidence building measure, and it will reduce tension in the region and make the region more peaceful, and maybe help the Indian government change their mindset on which they are right now fixated in terms of pursuing religiously extremist policies. So it is an important step, and we can just hope, though it will be a huge challenge for the Indians to accept or respond positively to Pakistan's initiative. But as we just mentioned that the new security policy is not just about securing Pakistan's territory, but it's more focused, or if not equally focused, on citizens of Pakistan. And if so far we have been focusing on securing Pakistan's territory, now this policy also aims on securing the people of Pakistan in terms of health or education or jobs or governance, and eventually their well-being. And I think this new focus will certainly bring in a new era for the people of Pakistan, and we can look forward to an environment, a situation, a time where all these major issues would be given due importance and addressed. Because so far we have seen there was very limited budget allocation for health, for education, and there were very in fact diminishing employment opportunities for the youth. And now this policy is going to
now we also talk about because you said that people centric social issues are also addressed in this particular one, sir, whether you talk about health or education or otherwise, because healthy nation can be productive, educated people can deliver more. I mean, this is a reality. Now, sir, we've also been joined in by Kamran Yusuf Saab, senior journalist, senior anchor person. Kamran Saab, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum, Faisal.
Good to have you on the show, Kamran Saab. The other day we were talking about a very important issue, and that was about the demands of the TTP. And then, we also learned that on the 9th of December, the ceasefire was almost, it doesn't exist anymore. This was also addressed by the DGISPR. Now, sir, looking at the kind of threats, because I'm going to be very specific about this threat that is emanating from the western side, supported by certain intelligence agencies, and perhaps to damage Pakistan, to make Pakistan bleed, sir. And they had this 4-point agenda. One was about the, they were against the merger of FATA. They wanted their prisoners to be released. They also wanted, that the TTP should be able to open up an office. And last but not the least, again, Sharia and their version of Sharia. So, sir, that issue is going to be there. And recently we got to know that Khorasani was also eliminated. Now, that threat is going to multiply, number one. And secondly, sir, I want you to also throw light on the major features of this national security policy. And do you think 2022 onwards, this is exactly what we want, or something should have been subtracted or perhaps added?
Well, first of all, talking about the TTP, I think it appears that for now, there are no prospects of any talks, ceasefire, or any peace deal. And that is evident from the press conference that we saw recently by DG ISPR, and said that the talks were on hold, and Pakistan is conducting operations on a daily basis, and the fight against the TTP and other such groups will continue till the threat is completely eliminated. So for now, it appears that there are no chances of any peace, a deal, or any talks, although Afghan Taliban are trying to convince both Pakistan and the TTP to return to the negotiating table. But given the fact that some of the conditions put forth by the TTP, those were absolutely not acceptable to the people of Pakistan as well as to the state of Pakistan. So it appears that things are not looking bright on that side. As far as the national security policy is concerned, of course, the government is saying that this is the first ever national security policy that will cover not just the internal security but also the foreign policy. And it is important, I think, as Dr. Mueez Yusuf, who is the National Security Advisor and one of the key players who has been working on this policy, says that we should have a codified policy. The only question is that we have even such policies in the past, but probably those were not, I should say, in a comprehensive manner. And this particular policy, one of the background briefings that I also attended, was meant for future direction, not necessarily looking into the current picture that we have or current economic situation or the foreign policy situation. They are looking for a future direction of the country. And in that context, I even also, filed a story where the emphasis as far as with immediate neighbors are concerned is seeking peace. And seeking peace with immediate neighbors means also seeking peace with India. But of course, that there is a big caveat also that for that the environment has to be created. There are certain preconditions that Pakistan is looking at. For example, that India has to create an environment where the dialogue can take place. And if there is a dialogue and if there is a progress in it, then of course Pakistan can think of normalizing ties with India, the trade, the business, activities between the two countries. So the intention is clear from the Pakistani side. The only question is how we can implement that policy. And for that, of course, you also need internal consensus. At this juncture, what I understand that opposition has not been taken into confidence. Rather, in one of the parliamentary briefings where NSA briefed the parliamentary committee on this national security policy, at that time opposition members boycotted that policy. So if we are to be successful and implement that policy, we have to have bipartisan consensus. And let's hope once the policy is out, and then the government will also reach out to the opposition parties, because you know that tomorrow opposition can be in the government. So if you don't have a consensus, then when the opposition comes in the government, that they may reverse, whatever policy initiatives that are going to be taken by this government.
Now, Kamran, another important aspect, as you mentioned about the role of the opposition. I think opposition always, takes a different stand, and perhaps they follow a different strategy at times, just for the heck of it. Over here, they have in fact launched it for 2022 onwards till 2026. So you're talking about 5 years. So let's suppose if PTI is unable to win the next election, do you think there is going to be a reversal or some sort of a change in the policy, sir?
I think in this new national security policy, there is also a provision, that they can review this policy on annual basis. And secondly, when the change of government, the new government can also review and revisit that policy. So that is given in this new national security policy, what I understand, the briefing that I received. So there is always a room, because the government also understands, the current government also understands that new government or every government can have their own priority. The main question is that what are the larger objectives that you want to achieve? Of course, I think every government wants, economic security. Every government wants, good relations with all the neighbors. And I think on that issue, for example, when you talk about the foreign policy, the two things that are highlighted, one, that peace with immediate neighbors, and second, the economic diplomacy. On that issue, I think I don't see any difference between the PTI government or PMLN or People's Party. Even the PMLN and the People's Party, they even tried normalizing relations not just with India but other neighboring countries. So on that issue, I think there is a consensus. The only issue is how we will implement that. So you know that even during the People's Party government, they even tried to normalize ties with India. They even wanted to give most favored nation status to India, and even also PMLN even tried it, but that could not happen because of opposition, not just from the other groups, but also, I should say, from the establishment, because we feel that if we give these concessions without resolution of Kashmir issue, then our position on Kashmir will be weakened. So on these issues, I think we need a consensus that how we need to move forward on certain issues. Can we do trade with India? Can we normalize relations with India without resolution of Kashmir issue? We have one example, for example, the India-China relationship. They have also territorial disputes. They have, border issues. They have a border standoff for last couple of years. Yet this year, their bilateral trade will be a record high. That is going to be $114 billion. So can we replicate that kind of
I totally agree.
approach? Some people say
Kamran,
that
even
could be an
look at
idea.
the trade between China and Taiwan. I mean, no matter what sort of dispute they have, but at the end of the day, money makes the difference. That is what matters. Now, coming to you, Dr. Sahiba, one important point, since we were talking about not only the security issues, but I think foreign policy issue is also very important, and that is directly linked with your economic ties with that particular country, whosoever you're talking about. Trade is the key, is the most, I would say, important bond between two countries. I mean, I just gave the example of China and Taiwan. No matter what sort of foreign policy issues they have, but at the end of the day, the kind of trade they do. I mean, 60% of the overall chips that are being manufactured are exported out of Taiwan. I mean, look at the number. The businesses have come to a halt, whether you're talking about the car manufacturing or robots or any other machinery for that matter. So that is the kind of strength the Taiwanese enjoy at that level. Ma'am, talking about our foreign policy towards the Middle Eastern countries, towards India, towards China and towards USA, so on and so forth. Now we are also opening up towards Russia. But ma'am, our National Security Advisor, Mr. Moeed, always says that we do not believe, even the Prime Minister has very categorically mentioned, we do not believe in camp politics. But ma'am, unfortunately or fortunately, this is the reality. I mean, you have been a very close ally with the United States of America for such a long time, but now things are different. There is a lot of trust deficit. I mean, it's very obvious, it's very open. As far as China is concerned, they're looking after you for a long time. They're still helping you in thick and thin. But again, I mean, there are a lot of ifs and buts over there as well. Now, how to create that balance between the two if you don't want to, in fact, become, a country which is keeping one of its foot in one camp and the other in the Chinese camp, let's suppose. That is not the way forward. Either we will decide, or do you think we are strong enough to come up with a viable policy where we can create that kind of a balance, ma'am?
Faisal, I don't think that Pakistan, is in any position to play bloc politics. And people say that this is the new Cold War between China and the US, and I don't agree with it. I've written about it and said it on various forums that this is not the new Cold War, and Pakistan would not have to choose a side and will also not be asked to choose a side. So I don't think, need to worry about balancing either China or the US. They have enough on their own. Their politics is in a much larger domain, and Pakistan is a very, very small player in all of this. Yes, Pakistan is affected by the great power competition between US and China because of the close strategic relationship that India shares with United States vis-a-vis China. And as long as India continues to play that China card, it is going to benefit from even deepening a deeper strategic relationship with India, with United States. With respect to Pakistan, Pakistan just needs to, the focus of national security, as you mentioned earlier, and my fellow panelists also talked about, is economic security, right? But what does it, if you break it down, what does it mean for Pakistan? Pakistan right now is in no position to project its economic power because it does not have a backbone. So the inward-looking component of this national security policy basically believes that Pakistan's system of governance, it needs to become strong enough to deliver basic standard of living to its nation, its citizens of Pakistan at a very individual and family level, which will, once stabilized, will project at the regional level as well. With respect to CPEC, we have been telling the United States that CPEC is not a zero-sum game. We want US investment in the special economic zones that are part of CPEC. So it is not at the cost
We
of
want
keeping
that,
the
but it's
US
not
out
happening
and
and it
choosing
will
a
not
side.
happen.
Sorry?
I'm saying, ma'am, we really want to, but it's not happening and might not happen.
It is not happening at the moment because you do not have too much to offer on the table.
So,
Remember
what do
that
you think?
CPEC
What should
project-
we offer? I mean, what do we have in our pocket to offer?
At this point in time, the bilateral relationship is low key and for all the right reasons because our deliverables are very small. And that is why the focus needs to be inward, strengthening Pakistan's economic base, be inward looking, ensure that Pakistan has energy security, Pakistan has food security, Pakistan has water security, Pakistan has security from national disasters, the social welfare program. You have enough of an economic system in place which provides an individual a stable employment system. So overall Pakistan needs to manage the risk of an economic failure, and until and unless we get there, I don't think so that we will be in a position to offer United States or any other country any of the dividends that we tend to accrue from CPEC. And remember that CPEC timeline is 2030. We have suffered from ad hocness in our foreign policy. I think this national security policy, as one of the fellow panelists said, is a long-term strategy. It wants to give Pakistan a financial economic base, and it's an umbrella document, right? And in order for it to be implemented, you need sectoral policy reforms. They need to be undertaken to ensure that all these elements are either generated if they don't exist, and sectoral policies are made which will come together to make sure that the core elements of national security policy are implemented and the NSP overall achieves its objectives. So I think we need patience. There cannot be some short-term ad hoc strategies that overnight Pakistan's economic spine is going to be resurrected. I think it's going to take time, and irrespective of what government is in power, this is not a PTI's national security policy. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be PPPs. It shouldn't be PMLNs. It should be Pakistan's national security policy. And irrespective of who's at the helm of affairs, the core elements of national security policy, even if reviewed, need to hold their ground.
All right. Now, a very important point raised. Ma'am just said that it should not be PTI's policy. The military, whether they will be working under PTI or PPP or PMLN for that matter, sir, they have their own design and they have openly submitted whatever their required input was. But interestingly, sir, when you talk about Pakistan People's Party, I mean, or you listen to them on the floor of the House or other political parties for that matter, sir, do you think it should have been much better if certain individuals or intellectual minds would have been there along, because this is about the national issue, sir. It's not about any provincial or individual's problem. So it could have been much more appropriate if there was more synergy into it.
Well, when you say synergy, you mean political synergy.
Yes.
And well, as far as a wider consultation is concerned, to my knowledge, I think it was in the media as well, over 600 people or professionals were consulted, besides several others. This I'm talking of professionals. So it's a very well well thought out and well researched and comprehensive policy. And of course, the government did make an attempt to get the opposition on board by giving a briefing to the cabinet committee, the parliamentary committee, and unfortunately the opposition chose to boycott that briefing. for obvious reasons, which is basically politics. And I'm sure in due course of time, as the policy document already has a provision for an annual review, and as mentioned by Mr. Kamran Yusuf, for a review by the next government if there is a change of government. So if a new government does come, a new party does come in, they'll have an opportunity to bring in changes which suits their manifesto or their thinking. So, and maybe over a period of time, it will be adopted nationally and across the board, and without any party label on it. So at the moment, yes, it does appear that probably is a PTI sponsored document, written document, but I think with time it will become a national document. And unfortunately, of course, it has not started as such, but it has all the potential to become a national document in due course of time. So I think that part of its political sensitivity will get addressed. It's only a matter of time.
So perhaps matter of time. Now, a quick comment from you, Kamran, since you also mentioned about something really important. You can always come up with a perfect document, but the real challenge is when you implement it. This is what we have also witnessed when we were talking about the National Action Plan. There are so many issues, so many ifs and buts that are always present. What could be the testing issue regarding the implementation, A, and what could be the real hindrance in this, the kind of, I would say, problems that could emerge?
I think it depends that what policy actions that you're talking about. When it comes to, let's say, internal security, of course, that you need a consensus. For example, one area that we have to be absolutely clear, I understand that there has a clarity now that we should get rid of all these militant organizations, irrespective of whatever their ideology is. And I think if there is a clarity, I think going forward, for example, to improve the internal security, and if there is a consensus, but if, for example, we have a habit of using certain groups for political mileage or for electioneering, that could, jeopardize our internal security. On the economic side, of course, that you need to take major decisions. For example, you need to improve governance. You need to, overhaul our bureaucratic system. If you are to deliver, for example, that they have identified different areas, population is the key area that they have identified, that we need to, work on this ever-growing population, which is, of course, one area where we seldom really talk about. Then this document also talk of food security, water and climate. So these are the issues clearly related to the governance. So the only problem that I can foresee at the moment, it appears that we do not have the ideal governance model. And no matter what kind of policy that we draft, if we do not have, the kind of reforms that we require at the grassroots level that implement those decisions, then this policy can be a failure. And of course, on the foreign policy front, again, that we need to have a broader consensus. Broader consensus, I mean, that we have a checkered history, of course. We have seen in the past that the elected governments wanted to pursue a certain policy, but then the other institutions were not on board, and that, created a lot of problems. So I'm assuming and hoping that this time around that we have a, broader consensus, and whatever, policy that we pursue, not just the political parties, the elected governments, but all the other state institutions will wholeheartedly support it. If that happens, certainly things can change. And one thing I would like to add, this implementation part, the briefing that I received, they said that there is a specific chapter that deals with the implementation mechanism. So the authors of this new national security policy are certainly aware of this particular aspect, that no matter what document that you come up with, unless that you have an implementation mechanism, it will be exercised in futility. And I think that they are aware of this thing. And even I'm told that the Prime Minister will be getting implementation report on monthly basis, that what are the progress on certain issues. So there is a mechanism to implement that national security policy.
Absolutely. Now, last quick comment from you, since Kamran Sahab just mentioned about the implementation framework for state institutions. I think you can come up with a brilliant document, but unless and until that is implemented in its real philosophy and with the right approach, if it is not, it's useless. If it is, yes, then we can move forward. Then we can have the contingency plans and everything. Ma'am, the role of the institutions, because when it comes to National Action Plan, one thing was very much there, and that was about the interaction and the synergy which was missing between various intelligence agencies, unfortunately. Over here, you need to be on one page. Quick comment from you, Dr. Saiba.
About it. As long as, the institution, civil, military, and it's a whole of government approach that Dr. Moeed Yusuf has also referred to in referring to the National Security Policy Framework. If it is a whole of government approach and sectorial reforms that are much needed take place, which is again going to take time, again, not a short-term measure, then obviously we can see success of this policy. Policies should be judged long-term. They cannot be judged on, monthly basis. Reviews can happen, but success of a policy would be in its reform procedure. And Pakistan surely needs governance reforms in all sectors for NSP to be implemented.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Saiba. It was a pleasure having you, Kamran Yusuf Saab and Avim Saab. It's always good to have you on the show, so thank you so much for your time as well. And that's all we have for this. I'll see you again. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.